This is On Point with Miss Britt, bringing you Week 14 college football recap, and this was championship weekend. Now, before I get into it, let's just go ahead and talk about, the college football playoffs. That's set. The bowl games are set, and then the Heisman Finalists, and then I'll go over the recap. All right, so they just dropped the bomb. Who's in the playoffs? And my Buckeyes snuck right in there. So we have on New Year's Eve for the Fiesta Bowl at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have Michigan versus TCU. And then at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Peach Bowl, we have Georgia versus OSU. So that's the semifinals. So we'll see what happens. They're saying that Georgia's got an easy road, Michigan got an easy road, but you never know what can happen in the playoffs. All I know is I'm not letting these games ruin my New Year's. I'm not letting that happen. So whatever happens, happens. And then we have for the Sugar Bowl, we have Alabama versus Kansas State. For the Rose Bowl, we got Penn State versus Utah. And for the Cotton Bowl, Tulane versus USC. And the Orange Bowl, we have Tennessee versus Clemson. So, we'll see what happens. We'll see. Oh, and then also, before they announced who made it in, Nick Saban had a few words and wanted to throw some shade at Ohio State. And basically, he was justifying for Alabama to get in because they're Alabama, despite having the 2 losses. But because their name is Alabama and they hold so much weight, they deserve to get in. But let me tell you something, Nick Saban. Your time is up, so get to stepping, okay? Now, they just announced the Heisman Finalists, and this is a QB fest. We have C.J. Stroud from The Ohio State University, Caleb Williams from USC, Max Duggan from the quarterback at TCU, and then they just threw in Stetson Bennett, the quarterback from Georgia, because Georgia's undefeated, and Hendon Hooker is injured, and so is Blake Corum, if we being real. So that's going to be interesting who wins this. I don't even know who's going to win this, but all I do know is one person better not win it, and that's all I'm going to keep it at that. Let's get into this recap. So last Friday, we had number 4 USC versus number 11 Utah. And this was for USC to try to make it in. And obviously they lost this game because Ohio State made it in. So let's just recap it. So first of all, Utah won 47-24. Caleb Williams, he had a 2-yard touchdown pass to Taj Washington, and that was the first score of the game. The game was tied at 17-17 at halftime. Then Utah, they owned the second half. USC's quarterback, Caleb Williams, he had a hamstring injury from the first quarter, but still managed 3 touchdowns and 363 yards and an interception. Utah allowed just 7 points in the game's final 30 minutes. Utah scored 21 unanswered points in the second half after a big 57-yard touchdown pass from Cam Rising to Money Parks in the third quarter. Utah became back-to-back Pac-12 champions. Cam Rising finished 22-34, 310 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Caleb Williams. And also, Caleb Williams, before the game, walked into the game with F Utah on his nails. So I feel like he jinxed himself. You don't walk into no game like that and try to disrespect and don't think they're going to come hard. So, hey, it is what it is at this point. This game might have hurt his chances for the Heisman, but I still think, to be honest, they've been talking about him winning the Heisman all year, so he might win it. But we'll see what happens. All right, for the SEC Championship, we have Georgia versus LSU. And Georgia stomped right all over LSU, 50-30. And Georgia won the SEC Championship after losing to Alabama last year. Tight end Darnell Washington had 2 catches and a touchdown, and he had a 2-point conversion. And in the beginning, Georgia swatted away a field goal attempt, and Christopher Smith scooped it and ran 96 yards for a touchdown, and that was the first score of the game. And then the rest just was a beatdown. Georgia's running back Kenny McIntosh, he had 2 rushing touchdowns, a 2-yard and an 8-yard. And then Stetson Bennett threw a season-high 4 touchdowns with 274 yards. And they capture the SEC championship and the #1 spot in the playoffs. Okay, for the Big 12 championship, we had number 10 Kansas State versus number 3 TCU. And this game did not disappoint. It ended up going into overtime. So in overtime, hold on, let's start from, first of all, in overtime, Kansas State's Ty Zentner, he kicked a 31-yard field goal to win the big championship for Kansas State, 31-28. After TCU's running back Kendre Miller was stopped on consecutive plays inside the 1, which I don't understand why they kept giving him the ball every single down when they should have just did a quarterback sneak. Max Duggan was on fire. I mean, come on now. Y'all, I think that would have been the move. If you're going to go for it, they should have did a quarterback sneak. I bet Max Duggan would have got it in. Or kicked a field goal, one of the two. But they decided to go for it on 4th and goal, and they got stopped. So Kansas State's running back Deuce Vaughn ran 130 yards and a touchdown, and their quarterback Will Howard threw 2 touchdowns and 199 yards. Heading into the 4th quarter, Kansas State was up 28-17, and this is where TCU's quarterback Max Duggan, he came in clutch with 2:35 left on the clock. He ran 40 yards on 2nd and 20 at the Kansas State 48 to get 1st and goal at KSU 8 yards. And then he ended up scoring on an 8-yard touchdown run and then completed a pass to Jared Wiley for a 2-point conversion. And that tied the game 28-28, which sent it into overtime. And then that was a bad play calling. So they kind of screwed themselves out of the win. But they still ended up making the playoffs because the game was close. Max Duggan, he had 251 yards passing and a touchdown and 110 yards rushing and a touchdown. Which is why I said what I said about them. They should have just had him running in. Okay, so for the Big Ten championship game, we had Michigan versus Purdue. And, the first half, Purdue, they was hanging on. They kept it close, 13-14, but then the second half, Michigan took off. And they ended up winning 43-22. And Michigan's running back Donovan Edwards ran for 185 yards and a touchdown. J.J. McCarthy threw 3 touchdowns and 161 yards. And Michigan became back-to-back Big Ten champions for the first time since 1991 and 92. All right, so the ACC championship, we had number 9 Clemson versus number 23 North Carolina. Clemson captured its 21st ACC championship with a 39-10 win over North Carolina. Clemson started quarterback Cade Klubnik. And recently they just said the original starter, DJ Uiagalelei, entered the transfer portal. All right, so Cade Klubnik, he had a touchdown and 279 yards passing and ran for 30 yards. And then he had a rushing touchdown. And Clemson's running back, Will Shipley, he had a 2-yard touchdown run. And then Nate Wiggins had a 98-yard interception return for a touchdown. And then Clemson completed a 2-point conversion on that play. Okay, so then we had Toledo versus Ohio, and Toledo captured its first MAC championship by beating Ohio 17-7. Toledo's quarterback DeQuan Finn passed for 154 yards and a touchdown and rushed for 86 yards. And then we had Jackson State University versus Southern in the SWAC championship, and Jackson State beat them 43-24, and Jackson State went back-to-back as SWAC champions. Jackson State's Shane Hooks had 2 touchdowns, a 14-yard touchdown and a 40-yard touchdown catch. And Shedeur Sanders, he finished 320 yards and 4 touchdowns. And it was just announced that Deion Sanders is leaving Jackson State to go coach at Colorado. And that is creating a stir on the internet. That is all the recap I have for today. And I'm excited for the playoffs. we will see what happens. And it's always go Bucks no matter what. And with that, I'm out.